Hi everybody, I'm here with James Reynolds, National Party Deputy Leader and General Election Candidate for Longford-Westmeath. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Garage, to be speaking with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you as well. I feel very privileged to have you on. I genuinely do. And I think a lot of people will be excited to click on this one and hear what you have to say, because I think a lot of people are excited for your candidacy in particular. I think people kind of maybe see you as a bit of a favourite to get elected within some of the nationalists. So we'll see what happens or whatever, but I think a lot of people have high hopes for you. Now the first question I have for you is how you got into the National Party, because you're a co-founder, aren't you?
I'm a co-founder of the National Party,
How did that happen?
with Justin Barrett back in 2016, which is almost we're approaching our 4th anniversary of the formation of the National Party. We Justin and myself, actually it was the National Party was the brainchild of our leader Justin Barrett.
Yeah.
And I remember I got as far back as 1994, which is almost 26 years ago. I met Justin Barrett first. We were both involved in pro-life politics at the time. There was an attempt to undermine to seriously undermine the 8th Amendment in 1992 with the X case. You remember, and to use threatened suicide as a means of introducing abortion on demand. So the Supreme Court had reinterpreted the 8th Amendment back then, and the pro-life movement got mobilized back then, and people who were pro-life, like Justin Barrett and like myself, were involved, and we were kindred spirits back then, and we met each other, and we found that we had much more in common than just being passionately in support of the right to life of the unborn child and against the horror that is abortion murder. That we actually shared a nationalist view, a wider nationalist political viewpoint on a whole variety of issues where we wanted to Irish people to come first in their own country. We both subscribed to the Peircean dogma of Ireland belongs to the Irish, which is our party slogan. And Justin had and I have to give full credit to Justin Barrett, who came up with the idea of the National Party as a vehicle for the national idea, no pun intended. And it took us a long while until we actually brought this to fruition. And unfortunately, we were both very young men at the time. Justin was in his early 20s, and I was same here. We were both, it was a different era.
So this is back in the 90s?
In the 90s.
So are you saying the genesis of the National Party, even though it was established in 2016, goes back
to Justin Barrett?
Yeah.
Explained to me in 1992, and I completely bought into it.
Yeah.
But it was actually it was the brainchild of Justin Barrett from he was 16 years of age, and he was born in 1971. So we're talking about something like 1987. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's mad, because sometimes, I'm in my late 20s now, and sometimes, there's I suppose you could say a generation gap there. Sometimes people of my vintage or generation will think we have all the ideas, or we've just stumbled across this stuff, but I would have been in nappies when you and Justin were.
And what's fascinating about Garage is that what's really unique and what was really exciting about the National Party and the idea of it, and what captivated myself when Justin explained it to me first, was this wasn't just, he illustrated and explained not just what his interpretation or idea of what might work to save the country, salvage the country, take our country back in terms of setting up a political party or a vehicle for the national idea that could help achieve that. But he had a down pat. He actually explained. He had formulated a concept that I thought was very unique, which this idea of a political party that would be vehicle for the national idea, with the national idea that goes back to Porrick Pierce and goes back to our Patriot Dead and precedes those. It goes back to the Great O'Neill. It goes back for centuries. But
I just have to say, because on the way up here I watched a video for the second time. I've forgotten the name of it, but I will link to it. It's you going through the entire history of Irish nationalism, and we're not going to have time for you to go through it now. But for people to open a second tab and watch it afterwards, I thought that was
Irish nationalism didn't just appear in the scene in 1798. Yeah. Irish nationalism was there during the 9 Years' War and the battle which culminated in the disastrous Battle of Kinsale, which subsequently made the plantation of Ulster. It goes back further than that.
So you were basing the genesis of the National Party on this stuff. I kind of took you off there. You were talking about the national parties.
Yes,
kind of,
what was fascinating about Justin's idea about the National Party is that unlike any other political party, this was a political party, and no disrespect to other political parties that are of a nationalist mindset in competition with the National Party now, but this is what makes the National Party stand out from the crowd is that Justin had formulated the idea of a political party that had a definite, clear ideological political programme, and the ideology was Irish nationalism, Gaelic nationalism, love of Ireland and its people and its preservation of our nation. That was primordial. That was to what the National Party idea was about. But its political programme would be based on principles, unchangeable, immutable principles, like the 10 Commandments written in stone. So you had a situation where you had a political party that would have as its bedrock unchanging principles that the future leaders of that party could never change, most people that are apathetic about modern politics and they have no respect for, and rightly so, for politicians, because most of them are just career politicians and they have no set idea. Most of them have no set ideology. They don't know what the word means, and they don't think beyond the next election or be a re-election. This was someone going back again. I go back to a teenager who was 16 years of age, who had actually formulated an idea that would give that would almost go against what's central to human nature is fallibility and our propensity to error and our propensity to compromise and to change with the prevailing ideas. So, see, to overcome that, it was like the Constitution of the United States of America with the Founding Fathers. This was the document, like the Founding Fathers document that established the United States of America. That we would have we would be a principled party.
Yeah, and
not just a nationalist party, but a principled nationalist party.
Yeah.
And I see it on my campaign now. People are crying out for someone that actually say what they believe and believe what they say. Well, and that's what the National Party is about. And that's why I am really passionate about the National Party. I'm very honoured that our leader now, Justin Barrett, bestowed on me the rank of being his deputy leader of the party. I'm honoured to serve as deputy leader of the party, and I hope I will do the party proud in the next week. But without anticipating the outcome of that election, I can tell you that the party is being this election campaign is electrifying the party, and we're gaining more members. We're gaining more donations. We are the nationalism is the coming force, and what really has encouraged me is to see the younger generation, the generation that we almost people my age group had given up on, have actually have woken up, and they've said, there has to be something better than what we have. Is this what it's about? Like, if there is no such thing as a God or finality, is this it?
Is this it? Yeah.
That we just have to be like hamsters on a wheel. That we go to college. Our parents have to work themselves to death to pay for our college fees. So that we can get we can get a degree or and qualifications to get a job and maybe a job a job outside of this country where we can enable us to emigrate out of this place, because this place there's no future. Young people can't aspire to owning their own home. They can't set up a family in their youth. This place is dying. Ireland is dying, and that's totally separate from the issue of the population replacement of mass immigration.
So even that aside, it's still a force.
Getting back to your question, George, I don't mean to digress. About this is the background. It goes back to the early 1990s, and then there was both of us took. There was a crossroads, but Justin Barrett and James Reynolds took different roles. In the meantime, Justin was involved in pro-life politics. He was involved in youth defence. Was involved in the Mother and Child campaign, and Justin Barrett was instrumental in persuading the Irish electorate for the first time ever to vote down a European treaty, namely the Nice Treaty in June 2001, when the Irish people, in their wisdom, voted no to the Nice Treaty.
And what road did you take then?
I took a different. I took a different road. Justin was got involved in Eurosceptic politics through pro-life activism.
Were you in
politics? I was in politics initially, and similar to Justin. I was involved in the Fine Gael party, and my family were Fine Gael family, and I was a member of the Fine Gael party from 1988 to 1991, and after 1991, I had lost interest in Fine Gael. Actually, I joined the Fine Gael party because I thought I was interested in politics, but it wasn't even. I lost interest in Fine Gael not because I was under no illusion that the party led by Alan Dukes was not a party that I shared even 1% of what my real political beliefs were, but it was because when I went to Fine Gael meetings there was this emptiness, this hollowness, this nothingness. These people were interested in what are we going to do? Are we going to win? Are we ever going to get back into government? And it was all like back in the Fine Gael team over the Fianna Fáil team. It was nonsense.
Yeah, I do find when you speak to those kind of people, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael,
hollowheads.
Sometimes it can be jarring. You speak to them about your beliefs. You might want to engage, discuss,
but they
debate.
had no beliefs at all. Yeah.
They'd almost laugh at you. They'd almost go, "Jesus, this fella actually believes in something." There's this. Would you agree? There's a cynicism there.
But when I was involved in Fine Gael, it wasn't even that. It was I actually was in bizarre situations where people actually at Fine Gael meetings agreed. Geez, that's a grand point. That's a great point. I think you have something there. They actually would agree with me, and they wouldn't understand. I'd be telling them stuff, and they wouldn't understand it. And these people that go back then to the tribe, to the party. It was very much like almost like tribal politics in the north. Almost between the green and the orange. It was almost like that between Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil.
Yeah.
And like they are different and you're one of us. And I could say something that was totally in conflict with Fine Gael policy. But if it came from Fine Gael, they'd listen to me. So I got tired of that. I thought it was wasting time. And as I was a full-time farmer, because I was an only child, inherited the family farm, my father, Lord rest him, transferred the farm to my ownership in 1992, and I got involved. I decided that I was interested in policy. I was a policy-driven person. I wasn't finding anything. Even Fine Gael policies weren't being discussed at Fine Gael meetings. That's how bad it was. Fine Gael policies were not being discussed at Fine Gael meetings. The only time that I actually came into conflict openly with a Fine Gael policy or strategy was the time of the 1990 presidential election, when Fine Gael recommended that after voting for their presidential candidate Austin Curry, that they give their second preferences to Mary Robinson. I detested Mary Robinson and everything she stood for, and her globalist liberal agenda, and that's where, and that was a year before I left the party. But at that point, I lost interest in attending Fine Gael meetings. Then in 1991, I got involved with the IFA. I joined the IFA, the largest farm organisation in the country, and I found in farming political activism that I mightn't agree with it, with the leadership of the farm organisation. I joined the IFA, very much an establishment organisation that was Europhile, Euro-federalist in its political outlook. And as subsequent events have proven, farmers have lost confidence in them because of their closeness to corporate interests. Okay. And they had actually betrayed, at leadership level, at the top tier level, they were betraying the people they purported to represent. But I found in farming activism, I was meeting people who were intelligent and who were prepared to engage and speak about rural issues and farming related policies that some of them made sense, some of them do, within the confines of the an EU federalist construct. They didn't make sense, and therefore I bought into that, and I became very I put my head down and dedicated myself to farming activism, and worked my way through up the ranks of the IFA. I represented Longford on the National Industry and Environment Committee, on the National Rural Development Committee of IFA, right up until 2002, and I was at the Farm Business Committee after that, and I was County Secretary in Longford of the IFA executive here between 1994 and 1999. I was County Chairman, which is the head of the leader of the IFA County Executive between 1999 and 2003. But because of my opposition to EU federalism and the IFA's support for the Nice Treaty that my friend Justin Barrett had campaigned successfully against, because of their and I was a vociferous critic of, within the ranks of the IFA, of their pro EU positions back then. And because I was critical of a situation whereby the meat factories, the IFA relied on the meat factories to collect up to £4 million at the time of income, of their annual income that was collected from farmers on slaughtered livestock and meat plants. So that compromised the ability of the IFA to actually stand up and oppose against price fixing by the same meat factory cartel. How could they do that when they were reliant on the same meat factories to collect money from farmers?
With that difference, then, are you with them now, or
no? But what happened was that I was blocked. I was the first IFA county chairman in Longford who was elected, who had to face an electoral contest and win, because the establishment ran someone against me, and I won the election and I was elected. And there were no confidence motions put down on me because of my anti-establishment position right through my 4 years. And I weathered every one of those storms until the very end. I had to, because there was a term limit, I had to step down. But the IFA leadership, what we call them, that's located in the farm, we call them the farm centre, because the Irish Farm Centre in Bluebell is the headquarters. The Bluebell ensured that I would be blocked from going any higher. This fellow has to be stopped. If he became an IFA vice president or went to the top tier leadership of the IFA, he could split the organisation, and so I had to be blocked. And they used people in my own county, delegates in my own county, who were loyal to the establishment IFA, to undermine me with it, and because you need a united you need your at that stage the delegates in my own county to be united behind me.
Yeah.
If I wanted to aspire to a higher position, elected position in the IFA. So anyway,
No,
I'm digressing a lot
no,
further.
well,
but that's why Justin was involved and threw himself into pro-life activism. I threw myself into farming political activism.
Well, it's a nice dichotomy to have those two things as experience for the party. Given that it's some of your policies to do with the rural Ireland and all of that, it's good you're there. But while we're on that topic, and I just want to say for the audience as well, we're not going to talk about agriculture for the entire video.
I know, yeah.
But just while we're on it, we might as well stick with it. The beef protests and all of that, right? I'm a bit of a city boy, so I want to ask, and for anyone else in the audience who doesn't know, for someone who, let's say, would tell you that they see the tractor protests happening, they know it's something to do with beef, but they don't know anything about it, and they don't know the jargon of the world of agriculture. How would you just explain simply for people what's going on?
I would simplify it for people, and when I said it on a radio debate with other candidates on Shannon said radio on Friday, the same thing. We can all understand whether you're a farmer or not, or you live in Dublin City or in rural Longford or in Westmeath. You understand the challenges and the threats posed by globalisation.
Yeah.
And essentially, farmers have been their livelihoods have been threatened for a long number of years at this stage by the forces of globalisation and price fixing by corporate interests, the meat factories, who deprive farmers of a fair share for the raw material that they produce for their industry, and which produces a profit for people like Larry Goodman, who doesn't pay tax on his profits, but that's another book because he puts his profits offshore. But that is made possible because of globalisation. We have a situation, just to give you background in relation to the beef situation, where every single month for the last 3 to 4 years, 30,000 tons of substandard South American beef is being offloaded, imported onto European markets, EU markets. And that's having the effect of displacing not just Irish beef, but French, Italian, German, Spanish beef as well.
Now, I want to take...
And that's the reason why the European average price has progressively reduced because of the concessionary trade between the EU and the South American countries.
Okay, so just for the sport of it, because I think you know this topic inside out, and I think you'd be able for this kind of bit of sport on it. What would be the Simon Coveney or whoever it is? What's their kind of argument for, if you make your point? Are they saying that
they're not putting up an argument, Garage?
Yeah.
Their argument is the same argument I think in relation to immigration and the free movement of people, is that that's the way the world is. Okay. We live in a globalised world. As Leo Varadkar said, I'm a globalist. This is globalism. That's why in the single market we're supposed when our borders are open to Eastern European immigrants, we were told we have free movement is one of the pillars of the single market. As the same in relation to Simon Coveney or Michael Creed, the Agriculture Minister, would say in defence, we can't interfere in the marketplace. The problem is that's a contradiction because the marketplace has already been interfered with. We have a rigged market. Because if you have substandard beef coming in from South America, where there is no, and I'm using EU jargon in this, there is no equivalence of standards. The EU have defined equivalence of standards, that there should be equivalence of standards because the EU have a very strong traceability system from farm to fork that assures consumers that European produced beef and lamb is of the highest quality. and has a green image, and especially coming from Ireland, where it's grass-based, grass-based product.
No, you're fine. For anyone else who's a bit of an immigration nerd like I am, you can tell me if this is a good analogy or not. The EU told us to take down our border to open it up to the rest of Europe, and that was kind of the deal. And then once we had done that, they opened up the external border of Europe to the rest of the world and let them in. So, I mean,
they're doing the same in trade
with South America.
They're doing the same in trade, and you have a situation where people may be familiar with the Mercosur deal, the EU Mercosur deal, where when I said earlier to you in this conversation that we're allowing 30,000 tons of substandard beef onto European markets every month, that's subject to tariff. There are tariffs paid on that beef that's imported, but because it's imported from countries with with currencies like the Brazilian real or the Argentinian peso, it's actually those countries are able to devalue their currencies to offset the tariff, the cost of the tariff, and make it so that they have to pay to get that product into Europe. So therefore, it's still a cheaper product than the product that's home produced by Irish and other European farmers on their home markets. But I will say this to you: what the Mercosur deal is about importing 99,000 tons per annum of substandard South American beef that's tariff-free. That has no tariff on it, which would completely undermine the European beef market. Now, there's the background in relation to the EU causing this crisis, price fixing by a rigged market by a meat factory cartel, and you have the supermarkets, the retailers as well, that are also profiteering on the backs of the primary producers of beef, namely the farmers. And to give you an illustration, a practical example, for every €10 that a consumer in Dublin spends on beef, for example, €10, €2.10, these are Chagas figures, goes to the farmer. €2.90, almost €3, goes to the meat factory, and a massive €5 goes to the supermarket.
Yeah, so that is globalism 101.
That is globalism. Yeah. Now, the only remedy for this is, and I hope that I'm in a happy position after next week to be able to enact this.
Just before you get into it, this is National Party policy.
Yes.
Okay. That
the National Party National Party TDs would bring forward a private members' bill, which you're allowed to do in Dáil Éireann, that would bring forward this what we could describe as fair pricing legislation. It's based on the minimum wage legislation, and this would ensure that farmers, as the primary producers of food, would be guaranteed by law a fair share of the final retail price of that food product. And that would mean, and we would also seek to have a regulator to deal with a food regulator for the retail and processing food sector that would ensure that would adjudicate on what that what that percentage should be for each food product. But give or take, you'll be talking about farmers will be entitled to at base minimum, they're getting 21%, as I said to you, of the beef price. A minimum 55% should go to the farmer, and that would be guaranteed by law. So that's something that would underpin and form and create a floor for beef prices,
and just for it
and make farming profitable again, especially beef farming.
Yeah, and I mean, then you would regenerate rural Ireland.
Yes,
obviously.
because agriculture is the engine that drives the rural economy.
And I was saying to somebody else I interviewed recently, or we were kind of talking about it, a simple thing like a coronavirus. So if a stick goes in the spokes of global trade at any point, I mean, you want to be able to just produce your own food and sustain that.
Absolutely,
that
and just on that point, and when you mentioned the coronavirus, which has occurred in China, China has also been hit with African swine fever, which has resulted in the cull of more than 3/4 of China's pig herd.
Actually,
So there's a huge that's why China will be a great market for Irish food products, Irish food exports, because there is because the Chinese ate an awful lot of pork or whatever, and it's not available anymore.
That's a big opportunity.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you as well. Can you think of any countries around the world who've enacted any kind of similar? I don't know if I'd call it protectionism, but to protect their local industries. I mean, it seems like every country is kind of swallowed up a bit. But I mean, a place like China,
no other country was done it. But just on that point,
yeah.
Our policy, the policy of the National Party is not for exiting the European Union, but it's based on the principles of interposition and nullification, which would actually mean that, to simplify it, it means that we, as a state, would interpose between the Irish government would interpose between the EU, Brussels, and the Irish citizen, and we would only accept EU laws that are beneficial to our people, and we would reject those that are not, and we would take back and repatriate those freedoms that were given away. It's one of the principles of the National Party.
It says a lot that something as seemingly obvious as that could be construed as a radical idea.
It's a radical, but why it relates to the agricultural argument is, you asked me a question, Carol, just why has any other country could done that? Again, this fair pricing legislation would run counter to single market rules currently, but the National Party policy of interposition and nullification overrides EU single market rules, because again we believe that the purpose of the Irish state is to serve the Irish nation, is to serve the Irish people, and only what benefits the Irish people matters, not what benefits the faceless bureaucrats in Brussels. We are not servile slaves of a Brussels elite. We have to become a free people. Once again.
So, I mean, basically you just want to get elected to serve the Irish people. Again, if you had said that to anybody 30, 40 years ago, it would have been completely obvious, but now it's you can't take that for granted. So it's good to hear you want to serve the Irish people.
And also in relation, and nullification and interposition would be artillery that would be used by a nationalist government here to push for tighter trade rules, to actually to prevent substandard imports from outside the European Union substandard beef coming in to the European markets, and undermining beef prices, not only for Irish farmers but for European farmers across the continent.
And we do see the protests in Holland.
Yes,
everywhere with
similar, and it's because of something has got to shout stop to this this EU federalist project that is about the EU federalist ideology rather than about Europe or about its peoples.
And there's a difference between those two things, obviously. Now, healthcare. Do you have a policy on healthcare? Because it's a bit of an issue at the moment.
Yeah, we have a and it's coming up on the doorsteps. The healthcare has reached crisis point in this country. We have we're spending as an economy. The Irish government is spending of Irish taxpayers' money. 18.2 billion is being poured into the black hole annually of the Irish health budget. 18.2 billion, and yet how outcomes for patients and those people, the old people and sick people that are languishing on trolleys in corridors in hospitals, has never been worse, and we're pouring 18.2 billion into it. And just to give you a perspective and comparison, in NHS in Scotland caters for a population of 500,000 people more than the state, 26 county state. And the NHS budget for Scotland is half the HSE budget here. Half.
Yeah.
And they have a bigger population.
Yeah.
And they have better outcomes.
Yeah.
The only because our health system is so broken, and remember it was the man who aspires to be Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, one of the who sat around the cabinet table when his Fianna Fáil government crashed the economy here against the rocks and brought in which resulted in the Troika, the IMF and the European Commission and the ECB coming in here and essentially taking over and commandeering the finances of this country, enforcing austerity and a bank bailout on our citizens. But the same Micheál Martin, when he was health minister, was the one who came up with the brainchild of the HSE, who invented the HSE, who introduced the HSE and abolished the previous existing health boards, regional health boards. So the system is completely broken. It only benefits the top tier management in the health in the HSE administration, namely HSE managers, and who are essentially wasters. These are people that actually practice on a daily basis the wasting and the profligacy of Irish taxpayers' money, you have a situation where again, as I said to you, the HSE is allowed to do this and allowed to carry out this gross mismanagement and also this gross mismanagement of scarce Irish taxpayers' money, and create this vast, unworkable bureaucracy, and that's riven with inefficiency, and it's created a culture of inefficiency within the health services and its delivery. And our solution, the only solution, and that's why the National Party health policy is resonating with people on the doorsteps when I explain it. And I explained it on Shannonside Radio the other day. And Robert Troy, the front bench spokesman for Fianna Fáil, I was debating against, and Peter Burke, who's in the Public Accounts Committee, didn't dare come back at me to debate it because they can't match our policy. The only way to fix a broken system like the health system is for root and branch reform from the beginning, and that means abolition, scrapping of the HSE. It has to be done away with, and the HSE has to be done away with. And we want to go bold. We want to go on. We're ambitious for Ireland, and we're ambitious for our citizens. And what we want and what we will be demanding is universal health care insurance. We want not only will we abolish the HSE, but we would abolish the GMS, the General Medical Scheme. We would abolish medical cards. We would replace medical card system, and the people poorer people who can't afford healthcare, who are medical card holders currently, would be entitled to free private health insurance paid for by the state. And this does two things. Yeah. It removes this two-tier. It abolishes the two-tier system, public-private. Everyone knows. I was talking to a woman on the doorsteps in Drumlish last night, and she was saying that she had to pay for a medical procedure, or she'd have to wait for 9 months to have it done, and she couldn't afford health insurance, and she had to pay out of pocket for it. That wouldn't happen with the National Party health plan. What would happen would be that she would have private health insurance. She'd be a private patient. Poor people would have private health insurance, and the state would pay for their private health insurance premiums at the basic plan level. What that does is it brings people up. Everybody. There's equality in the system. True equality in the system. The mainstream parties preach about the equality agenda, but they don't practice it. The health system is a classic example of inequality, where you have public and private. We want to get rid of this public system, and we want to make everybody's private. Every Irish citizen, every member of the Irish nation should be entitled to first-class health care when they're ill. Now, the second thing that this does as well is that for those of us who can afford to pay private health insurance, and find it unaffordable at this stage because of the escalating cost of private health insurance. Because the state, by virtue of scrapping the medical card system and replacing it with private health, with state subsidised private health insurance, the state becomes the largest group purchaser of private health insurance premiums. You have the state is buying up a huge amount of in bulk purchase of private health insurance premiums. That will have the result, following in terms of market economics, that will bring down the cost of private health insurance premiums for those who have to pay for it, drastically reduce it. And it will bring real competition into the healthcare market.
So I mean, again, I think you've made the point, but that is as distinct from the NHS. You're talking about a universal insurance, not universal.
Not NHS. It's not because in the NHS, everyone is public.
Yeah,
it's based on the Beveridge report. It's based on the welfare state in Britain. It's actually a socialist. It was introduced by the Attlee government, Labour government, post-war government, 1945. So but it works for Britain. British people have gotten used to it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about what suits the Irish people.
But you're saying,
and I want to aspire. We in the National Party want to aspire for something better than the NHS.
Oh yeah.
We want to aspire for something that suits the needs of Irish people, and we want a superior healthcare system to the NHS, and universal health insurance is that system.
It's a good attitude. Private, basically, it's kind of like publicly funded insurance. And you say universal though, is that so? Do you mean just for people who can't afford it, or literally?
No, it has to be means tested. Okay. It's for those currently, and again, it should be restricted to Irish people only. It will not. Medical card holders from overseas who are non-nationals would not be included in this because because go back to the Peircean dogma. Ireland belongs to the Irish and the Irish alone, but our people who are means tested and who are entitled and qualify currently for medical cards should instead of getting medical cards to get private health insurance cover subsidised by the state.
Okay.
So it's the same.
And there would be enough of the population who are paying for their insurance because they can afford to
But they can afford to pay and they can afford to pay for it. For a much cheaper, but it wouldn't be now. As you know, anyone that has private health insurance, and I have private health insurance, there are different plans, and there's a basic plan, and you can work your way up to a gold-plated plan or whatever. So obviously, those who qualify for free state subsidised private health insurance, who are poorer people who would be medical card holders, get into the first rung on the ladder. They get basic cover. They don't get the gold plated. If you want gold plated, even better private health cover, you should have to pay for it yourself. Yeah, that's only fair.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone objects to that.
I think they wouldn't object to it if they're doing
once
better.
There's basic equality.
Yeah.
But when it comes to healthcare, like our policy in relation to protection of the right to life of unborn children from conception onwards, there can be no exception. There has to be total equality. We believe in equality of the right to life from conception to the grave, from the children before they are born, our Irish children, and their lives should be protected. That's something that we believe absolutely. We believe in that sort of equality, and we certainly believe in when it comes to delivery of healthcare, it has to be based on equality for those who need it, because these are the fundamentals.
I'm going to be thinking quite a bit about that because it's a novel idea I've not come across myself before. It sounds promising to me at the face of it, but
and only a National Party government can deliver it, and that's what's so exciting about the National Party. If we can make this electoral breakthrough, so many possibilities, because we have policies. We have policies that would put people into a tailspin. Our policy, for example, we have a 220 billion national debt. Only the National Party have the policy that would use our membership of the Eurozone, which was so destructive to the economy of this country, because It was because, as even the former deceased finance minister Brian Lenihan admitted, it was because of cheap euro credit. In an interview he did in June 2009 with Matt Cooper on the Today FM show, he said it was because of cheap euro credit and cheap European labour, cheap Eastern European labour. That it was cheap Eastern European labour and cheap euro credit that overheated the economy that caused the crash. Our membership of the Eurozone was a disaster because the ECB, headquartered in Brussels, set a common interest rate for all the EU member states, for all the Eurozone states that were participating in the Eurozone currency zone, and because France and Germany were in recession when we joined the euro in 1999, the interest rates were actually reduced at a time because of the overheating of the Irish economy, when interest rates here needed to be increased. And also because of our membership of the Eurozone resulted in the removal of exchange controls between different, in terms of the transfer of credit and between individual member states of the Eurozone. So you had a situation where banks, which already, because of fractional reserve lending, could lend out 10 times what they take in deposits. And actually, interestingly, during the boom years, during the billion bubble, they were actually, or credit bubble, they actually lent 25 times what they took in deposits because you had no financial regulator.
Yeah.
So, and then on top of that, they actually borrowed themselves more credit from especially German banks, French and German and Dutch banks. And these loans were repackaged into subprime mortgages, which were high risk mortgages, and that led to this reckless lending policy on the part of the banks, led to the crash. But what I'm trying to say to you is that our membership of the Eurozone was and mass immigration post 2004 from Eastern Europe, because you have to remember that to justify this huge augmentation or expansion in a building program post 2004, you had to have an increase in population.
Yeah. And
the Irish demographics weren't, because of Irish people emigrating abroad, the population increase wasn't meeting the demands of the avarice of the banks and the building developers and the Galway tent people and Fianna Fáil people. So they had to import labour and import immigrants and immigrants had to live somewhere. Yeah. So that was this. They were used to justify
easy capital needs easy labour.
But it also
goes the other way.
No, but the immigrants needed somewhere to live, and therefore houses had to be built for them. So they were part of they caused a population bubble as on top of a credit bubble.
Yeah.
And that justified then this building bubble, which ended up in crash in the tears and the bank bailout and the adding of 64 billion to our national debt because of the bank bailout. And our policy is policy is, despite our disastrous membership of the Eurozone, here's another very interesting thing with the Eurozone. And myself and Justin Barrett, before the National Party was launched in 2016, we done a bit of analysis into this because we had to have an economic policy that made sense, and the euro currency, the single currency, economic and monetary union as it was based on the Maastricht Treaty, which was finally came into force in 1993, and we voted on here in March 1992. The Maastricht Charter governs the rule, or sets out the rules of governance for the Eurozone. A lot of us, our people think of nationalists, view the euro as a foreign currency because the ECB is headquartered in Brussels, and see it as essentially a German project and and that we have lost our monetary independence, which is true, and that we have actually no monetary autonomy as a country, as an individual member state of the Eurozone, which is composed of 19 member states. Now, the interesting thing is that analysis is actually fallacious. It's not correct. The Eurozone, every individual member state of the Eurozone, including the Irish state, is represented, has a shareholder. The Eurozone is a common currency zone. It's a common currency zone. It'd be a better definition of it. And we have and the governor of the Irish Central Bank sits on the governing council of the European Central Bank, which is headquartered in Brussels, and which is now presided over by Christine Lagarde of IMF fame.
Yeah.
As well as that, Ireland has a shareholding in the money supply, in the euro money supply. So it's not a question of one country, Germany, controlling the money supply. We have, under Maastricht EU rules, Eurozone rules, we have a definite shareholding in terms of euro money supply. Now, only 6%, as people are aware, only 6% of actually money supply is actually in the form of coin and cash. Most of it is in digits and on a computer screen, and because the banks can again lend what they don't have because of fractional reserve lending, that kind of skews what money any country's money supply. But according to Irish Central Bank indices, and this is going back to 2018, and it has increased since then. The total amount of Irish, or total stock of Irish held euros is 216 billion. Ireland as a state holds 216 billion's worth of the total supply of euros.
Is that real currency or
real currency?
Okay.
Well, the currency we have in our wallets.
Yeah.
Well, we have 216 billion. Is Irish. There's several trillion euros in circulation. There's Germans obviously have the French have a huge quantity of euros going into trillions, obviously. But we have 216 billion. Our national debt is 220 billion.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, the National Party policy is consistent. Again, this is why it's so important. This is why we are so. We're so different. I so disagree with nationalists involved in the other party, the Irish Freedom Party, that talk about a Rexit. This is why a Rexit is a disaster and it wouldn't work. As well as a Rexit depending on us having to invoke Article 50 and have a referendum here and vote it through, and Irish people wouldn't vote for a Rexit anyway. But because we're members of the European Union, because we're members of the Eurozone, we own, as I said, 216 billion. Our policy is to use our total stock of euros, and what we'd have. Do you remember when we in January 2002 when the state called in all the punts in circulation, and exchanged them for euros? We would do a similar exercise the other way around. That we'd call in all the euros in circulation, cash and coin euro, and exchange them for punts, because we're going to refloat the punt, the punt new or whatever we're going to call it. And but here's the situation: we would use the total stock, 216 billion of Irish stock of euros, to pay off the national debt. And therefore, when we launched the punt, relaunched the punt, for the first time ever, we would be a debt-free currency. It would be a very strong currency, and we would have to actually devalue the currency. It would be important because it would be so strong. It would be actually the strongest currency in Europe by far, because it wouldn't be carrying debts. Yeah,
now that would require quite a bit of nullification and
but we can do it. The Visegrad countries, led by Prime Minister Viktor Orban in Hungary, and in Poland, Slovakia, these countries have enacted interposition and nullification to a degree in relation to controlled migration. For example, when Chancellor Angela Merkel allowed in a million migrants into Germany, what was the response to Viktor Orban and the Hungarians to erect razor sharp barbed wire fences along the Serbian border? They weren't buying into that. The response of the European Union was to try to use Article 7 to suspend Hungary's membership of the EU. But what happened? Poland vetoed that. So it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But so Viktor Orban has succeeded in saying when it comes to migrant quotas, they're saying we're not buying into migrant quotas. We're not doing like Britain. We're not doing Brexit. We're not leaving the European Union. But we're not going to accept migrant quotas because Hungarians come first in Hungary, and Irish should come first, and it's the same principle. So what we could do, and it's perfectly legal. And the thing about it is they can't throw us out because I'm sure we would have allies like Hungary and like Poland and other allies with another Poland and Hungary countries that have strong immigration control policies and would be our natural allies in the European Union.
So it's a little bit of reformation within the EU and a bit of joining.
But you can see, Garrod, if we adopted our exit policy.
Yeah. Well,
if we adopted our exit policy, we just hold this round. Just say we were successful and we managed to overcome the bias of the Irish, the fears of the Irish people of voting, of following Britain and exit, and we did this. Just say we did. What would happen? What's the plan then? How do we pay off our national debt, 220 billion, in an exit situation?
And a leave deal of.
Because we remember we can only do this. We can only enact the means of cancelling, legally writing off our national debt by staying within the European Union. If we leave the European Union, we are no longer represented in the around the ECB Governing Council table. We're no longer those stock 216 billion of Irish stock of euro money supply. Is no is taken back. It's like the British flag being taken down in Brussels. That's gone. And do you know what will be? We have 220 billion of a national debt, which is denominated in euros, and we haven't got any euros now in an exit situation. And what do we have to do? We have to have default written on our forwards. We have to go like Argentina with the peso, and we have to default, and then we relaunch the punt. What happens to the punt? What value is the punt then? The punt would be only worth, would it be worth even 10 cents in the euro? And our national debt would spiral out of control. And that's why our exit is such a disaster. And that's why the IFP are, and I know these people mean well, and they're fellow nationalists, but really get on board with the National Party because you really are on the wrong track.
I just want to emphasise the point because I will see, and I don't mind, there's no problem with it, but we will see, and you can look forward to it now, the comment section full of debate on this, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but while you fundamentally disagree with the Brexit on this, right? You've made that very clear.
Yeah.
You're not to sound like the peacekeeper here, but like you've said yourself, you probably do have much more in common with them than you have.
Absolutely.
And in terms of this general election, whether it's accidental or not, I don't know, or really care to know. But I mean, you're not running against each other right now.
No.
And would you have, you would have more in common with Brexit than you would Sinn Féin or Fine Gael, I imagine. Or would you say it's such a fun...
Oh my goodness! We could. To be fair to IFP, I wouldn't compare them to the other parties. There's very good nationalist people within the IFP.
Yeah.
But my point to you, and as I explained, is that it pains me. It's because I know their motivation, their heart's in the right place. My heart, James Reynolds' heart says, go for a exit. I want out of the European Union. I want to tear down the blue flag. That's my heart, but that's not my head. My head tells me we can't sell this. It's insane.
Yeah.
You can't do this. And we have a 220 billion debt we have to look after. Only interposition and nullification, the National Party policy, can guarantee us that can restore Irish freedom without formally leaving the European Union. And what we have is, we're in here, the Greville Arms, which was Kitty Kiernan's home, where General Michael Collins visited when him and her had a romantic involvement back over 100 years ago. And Michael Collins, our lost leader, framed the term freedom to achieve freedom. That's what the Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921 was about, freedom to achieve freedom. We're following the same principle of Collins, that freedom to achieve freedom. Our exit is like the anti-treaty Republicans. They meant well. Anti-treaty Republicans were patriots. They loved their country. But my God, they were wrong. They were wrong on the treaty in 1921. Our exiteers are wrong in relation to their analysis.
I think most people will understand the nuance in that. But it's just there's always an element of people who kind of refuse to see the nuance. So I'm addressing them. I understand the nuance, and I think most people. But just as an example, constituencies where IFP are running, where you're not, and that's mostly the case. Would you advocate people vote for IFP in the absence of an N? Or are you apathetic on that?
I certainly would not advocate that people don't vote for nationalist candidates where we're not running. I certainly wouldn't. I'm not saying that at all. But my focus is primarily on, we have 10 candidates, 9 other excellent candidates running in Limerick, in Sligo Leitrim, Limerick City and County, in Sligo Leitrim, North Roscommon constituency, South Donegal, Roscommon, Galway.
You can't stop now.
I can't stop. Dublin North West, Dublin South West, Dublin South Central, Wicklow, and Laois Offaly with John Daly. We have excellent candidates. Our primary focus as a party, you'll understand this, Garrod, is to try to secure the election of each of the 10 excellent candidates that are presenting themselves before the election. That's what my focus is on. You're asking me a question in relation to candidates who have a nationalist motivation involved in other parties, in other constituencies, not competing against ourselves. I certainly, I know that nationalist-minded people and National Party members in those constituencies will act accordingly, and they don't need my direction. No, I think it's a natural. Yeah. When they go into the polling station, they're not going to vote Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil.
I think it's extremely fair. You have your point of view on that, and you've made it clear. I think most people will appreciate that. Now, to go on to another kind of policy thing, more straightforward type of thing, housing. Housing. Sorry, I thought I'd already said it. Do you have a policy on housing?
Well, as Justin Barr, her leader, said at our last Ardesh that was held in County Westmeath, that we haven't got a housing crisis; we have an immigration crisis, and if we can control our borders and control immigration, and actually remove the loopholes in the social welfare code that's attracting these foreign migrants. There's a large number, a significant number of non-nationals who are not working, who are in social housing provided by the state to these people who are aliens, who aren't Irish people, and at a time when there's increased demand for housing for our own people, and when we have scandalously 10,000 Irish people lying on the streets in these terrible conditions, lying in sleeping bags and lying in doorways, homeless. Yeah. And 3,000 children, and you have a little child, Irish child, eating his dinner or his lunch on a piece of cardboard. Now, any society that allows that to happen, has to look at itself, and certainly the state in this country has to be condemned for like this is a total variance with the Easter Proclamation. The Proclamation of 1916 says that the patriots that died for this country in 1916 said that we should in the Easter Proclamation that we should cherish the children of our country equally. Cherish our children equally, and of our nation equally. Are we cherishing the children of our nation equally? If you have a child eating his dinner on cardboard and it's raining on top of him,
it's hard.
It goes beyond a political viewpoint of this. It goes even beyond humanitarian. Having a humanitarian point of view. This is a point of view of human decency at this stage. human decency demands
So
that has to be addressed, and Irish housing for Irish people only.
And so, I mean, some people would say, oh, well, that's not going to fix everything. But actually, I think, if I can give my
it's not going to fix everything, but we have a wider housing policy I'll elaborate on.
I actually personally believe that it actually almost is as simple as that, because, I mean, we built social housing in the 30s and the 60s. Maybe you know better than me, but we've done it before. But we can't build social housing when the amount of people who would receive that social housing will be overwhelmed by the amount of people who will come into the country next year. You can't win on that basis. So
because demand is always outstripping supply. Always outstripping supply in that situation where you're importing your demand, for your housing demand all the time. But and you're correct in that. But I would go. And look, if you control immigration and send these people home. These people have a home to go to, and I find it really annoys me that I look at a country like Poland with admiration and envy. Poland has a nationalist-minded government. Poland has closed their borders to uncontrolled immigration. Poland, the Polish government is trying to put Polish people first in Poland. Why are there Polish people in Ireland? Why are there Polish people in Ireland when Poland, as a fellow member state of the EU, has gone about rebuilding their economy? Those people should. This isn't. The Polish people living in Ireland are not refugees. I find it. It's really a strong point with me. Every one of these people should be sent home,
and it's
without exception.
I think the anti-hate brigade might bring in the word hate, but.
I love Paul. I admire Paul.
I think you've suggested it's out of love for Polish people. Actually, it sounds like.
I think they're letting down their own country, and what they're doing is they are. And I know there are foreign nationals from Poland who have houses here in Ireland. They are taking up houses that could be given to Irish people, and it's wrong.
I mean, it's morally wrong. You're saying why would they come here and our people go elsewhere? I dare say it might be due to the whims of multinational corporations.
It's back to globalization again.
Yeah, it sure is. Because
these people are being who have Polish people, who have and Eastern European people who have jobs in Ireland, are being paid. They're here for cheap labour. Because the minimum it's statutory law. It's a legal requirement that the minimum wage is paid to everybody, and that's true. But what happens in practice is you have immigrants from who are who work here and are from, say, Eastern Europe or whatever. They're actually sharing accommodation, and they're paying exorbitant rents to landlords.
Yeah.
And their landlords are also their employers. So that's an indirect way of undermining the minimum wage that's paid to them, because they're here for cheap labour. And it's happening. I spoke earlier about the meat industry, about the corporate parasites in the meat industry, like the Goodmans and the Dawn Meats and the Keypacks and the ABPs of this world, that are exploiting farmers and have reduced farmers to penury and reduced them to being slaves to the meat industry that supplies them with the raw material for their industry. But the workers they employ, they have displaced and fired Irish workers. Most meat plants are actually where most meat factory workers are actually foreign employees. They're importing workers from Brazil to pay them cheap labour. They're working long hours, and they're getting around the minimum wage legislation.
So in one sense, you're bringing in Brazilian beef, and then where there's
bringing in Brazilian workers, and it's processed by Brazilian workers in Irish plants. And it's all globalization, and it's mad. Getting back to the housing situation, there's another. And this is back to globalization as well. And forgive me for expanding out or digressing, but as I explained about the bank, we are familiar with the bank bailout and about fractional reserve lending and how banks can create credit out of nothing. The banks overextended themselves during the boom years, during the Celtic boom, Celtic Tiger, or the building bubble before the crash, as we're familiar with. But a lot of them then okay, there was a bank bailout, but some of the banks that were like Ulster Bank that weren't Irish banks operating here, had a license to operate here, had a large portion of non-performing loans, what they term non-performing loans, were the poor, unfortunate people their borrowers, their victims, banks' victims were actually saddled with unsustainable debt, and they were in negative equity. And I'm meeting these people on the doorsteps. I was in Kilbeggan yesterday as well, canvassing, and I was talking to a young woman who was a nurse, and she was telling me she gave 245,000 for the house we were canvassing, and the house is only worth 140,000 today. She's still paying a mortgage for 245,000. The National Party policy is that mortgage should have been written down, but to reflect the market correction.
Yeah.
So how dare the banks still force that woman to pay exorbitant and extortionate repayments on a loan that was so exaggerated and so exorbitant because of the bank's own recklessness and the lending policies of the banks.
From the bank's point of view, they might have some leg to stand on if the currency that woman loaned from and is trying to pay back was backed by something solid. They might have some leg to stand on there. But the fact, and this is just my opinion, but the fact that it's pretty much fictional and imaginary, the currency anyway. Just to me,
but even separate from just park fractional reserve lending for a second.
Yeah.
The same banks, and I'm talking about our housing policy because this is central to our housing policy. All loans and mortgages that don't reflect the market, the actual market price, have to be corrected. In other words, they have to be written down. Mandatory writing down of those loan values, loan prices have to happen. That should be state policy.
Yeah.
That is our National Party policy. Now, in relation to, and you say, well, people might say, but you can't do that. Banks do that already. Getting back to the non-performing loans, Ulster Bank had 2.5 billion in non-performing loans, 2.5 billion euros in non-performing loans in the 26 county state. They sold off those non-performing loans to vulture funds because the European Central Bank have stress test rules on banks to ensure solvency in bank, and they are forced by under ECB rules to offload non-performing loans and to sell them off at a discount. They have to discount the price of the loans. That's to use banking jargon. And they discounted the price of the loans by 80%. So you had a situation where 2.5 billion euros worth of loans by one bank, a British bank belonging to the Royal Bank of Scotland Group, Ulster Bank, sold off their loans at 20 cents in the euro for 500 million. So our policy is forcing them by law to do what they're doing themselves to the vulture funds. They sell off, they do it all the time. AIB is doing it, all the banks, Permanent TSB, they're doing it. They're actually selling off what they term non-performing loans. These people are in trouble. They're not. At the moment, they're not evicting them. So let the vulture funds chase them. So to give you an example, that woman that has that I explained a mortgage of 250,000, and her loan falls into arrears and is non-performing. In this instance, say it was with Ulster Bank, they could have sold off her loan for 250,000 euro to a vulture fund like Cerberus or Goldman Sachs for 50,000, 1/5. But then Cerberus or Goldman Sachs chased that woman and terrorised that woman and threatened her with eviction from her home for the full 250,000.
Yeah. So it's used,
and that's allowed, and that's globalisation. And this is the Fine Gael Labour and Fine Gael propped up by Fianna Fáil have allowed the vulture funds and international finance tapeworms, parasites, to run amok, to run riot,
now, okay,
with no regulation.
on that point, we've kind of talked about a Brexit, the people who are closer maybe to a national party, and that's a different issue. But in terms of the other parties, the people before profit, so you've mentioned Fine Gael and those ones.
Well, people before profit are Marxist, Leninist.
They are, but I mean, they would claim to have answers to these things, to take on the vulture funds and this and that. Why would you set National Party above them in terms of radical solutions?
They have no solution to anything because they don't understand how the money system works, and they are quite content for all their loud talk about capitalist exploitation of the working class. They're quite content to leave super capitalists, crony capitalists, international finance parasites to leave them alone. All they want to do is chase after our indigenous small business sector and try to nationalise small business in this country and destroy and ravage the business sector in this country. That's all. They have no solution to anything. And in relation to they support I never heard the people before profit or Solidarity or any of these these groups talking about or advocating leaving the Eurozone, even leaving the Eurozone. And the only one on the left that I ever heard say that was Luke Ming Flanagan, and his daft way of leaving it, would be get back to what I said to you about us having default written on our foreheads, default on our national debt, and have a worthless pump. Yeah, that's Luke Ming Flanagan's solution for exiting the Eurozone, but he's the best of them. His idea is the most intelligent. The people for profit don't even want to leave the Eurozone.
Okay, so and in terms of setting yourself apart from the other parties, and this is kind of maybe my penultimate question, Sinn Féin, a lot of people will hear National Party and think of Sinn Féin, nationalists, that kind of thing. Again, what sets you apart from Sinn Féin?
Well, we're again sitting in the Greville Arms, which General Collins visited 100 years ago, when you had nationalist Sinn Féin, when Sinn Féin was the vehicle of the national idea. Sinn Féin was the national party. Sinn Féin was founded by Arthur Griffith, a great patriot. All they have is the name Sinn Féin. They are a party that has an ultra left wing ideology, but unlike the other ultra left wing parties or Marxist Leninist parties that you mentioned earlier, that just glorify in being anti-establishment, Sinn Féin want to become the establishment. They crave to be part of the establishment. They claim to be anti-establishment, but they crave to be part of it. Sinn Féin want to be part of a coalition government involving either Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil. As Mary Lou MacDonald said, to speak to it anybody.
Would you say it's like an inferiority complex to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael? Like they want to be on
because of their background, and because they were revolutionary Marxists and they engaged in terrorist campaign for so many years, that they were outside of the pale, outside of the law. They were political outlaws as well as being outlaws in other respects. Yeah. And now that they feel they've become successful in terms of achieving electoral mandates for themselves and their message, they feel that now is their time to actually to join the establishment.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of an inferiority complex. Yeah, I call it a political Stockholm syndrome. They have. Yeah. They have a political Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah. And so you can, I'll ask the question rather than make a statement. Do you think Sinn Féin would take on the likes of international finance capital?
No.
Yeah. I mean, I don't either.
Sinn Féin support the euro currency. Yeah. Sinn Féin support the European Union. It's very like the Scottish National Party is approach, an independent Scotland in the Europe. They're Europhile, they're Eurofederalists. They support Eurofederalism. They vote with the Eurofederalists. They're not. Any party that could regard the blue flag with the stars as a flag that you would give any respect to. The European Union is not a country. Ireland is this country. We have a national flag. It's the tricolour, the green, the white, and the orange. And my definition of Irishness is based on that tricolour. The green representing our Gaelic native people, the orange representing the Ulster Scots settlers that are here for 4 centuries, and the white, the reconciliation of both, which is principle number 1 of the National Party programme to achieve in a united Ireland, a united unitary state. That's what my idea of Irishness is, and the only flag that Irish people should, or anyone who purports to be nationalist, to be an Irish nationalist, should stand before and stand under and revere is our national flag. But these people stand under this foreign flag, and it's not even a flag of a country. It's a flag of an institution of the EU the EU Commission building in Brussels. It's the Commission building in Brussels. It's the flag of a bureaucracy, a foreign bureaucracy in Brussels. No nationalist can stand under such a flag.
Actually, I said that was the penultimate question. One more, and then we'll close off. And you can keep this as in a nutshell as you want, because we could talk for ages on the North, unifying Ireland and all of that. I don't know much about it, so I really am learning here. What would be your vision for unifying?
Our vision for unifying the Northern Ireland is the North with the rest of the country is. Not to do certainly what Sinn Féin did in the past, to alienate people that we have to bring on board. There's up to 1 million people of a different tradition who are Ulster Scots settlers. They belong to that orange in the flag tradition. And we have to reconcile with those people. We have to live with those people. They're 4 centuries here. They're Irish people now, and we have to find we need Irish unity, and I think that those people even recognise that even Boris Johnson, the British government, threw them under a bus on Brexit. When they were seen as expendable, they were thrown under the bus. They were betrayed by the people that they professed to be loyal to. There's no reciprocated loyalty from the British toward them. Yeah. And you see what the British imposed with the thanks to Sinn Féin and thanks to the SDLP, legalised abortion on demand in Northern Ireland because of the institutions, because of Sinn Féin and the SDLP refusing to resurrect the power sharing executive, to stop the British Abortion Act being extended to the North. They even recognise that Britain is interfering in the internal affairs now of the North that don't want abortion on demand, and as many Protestant people as Catholic people don't want abortion on demand. And now is the time, I think, that reasonably minded, open-minded Protestants and Unionists can see Irish nationalists, not Sinn Féin, genuine Irish nationalists, as friends. And we want to be the party representing the Green that extend the hand of friendship, representing the white, to our orange neighbours in the North, to bring about that reconciliation. I'm not going to anticipate how ultimately that will pan out, what that will result in. We aspire to Irish unity for the Irish nation, but obviously it would involve a negotiated settlement. A negotiated settlement that would give a degree of autonomy to people of a different tradition. I certainly wouldn't agree with treating those people in the same way as they treated our people. I think that's only a recipe for disaster. We have to be magnanimous. They're here now, and we have to have we have to reach a negotiated settlement which everybody will recognise is fair, but within the overall parameters of the Irish nation achieving their their entitlement, their entitled aspiration to Irish national unity.
So there's maybe a slight element of multiculturalism you could respect in that sense.
I've known people who regard themselves as British and people and have a different tradition and have they even have Ulster flags or Union flags or whatever, and their own orange marches, whatever. Once those were not, once they weren't permitted to be triumphalistic against Catholic nationalist people, their neighbours.
You would return the favour.
I would return the favour. I would certainly not be in agreement with banning the displays of their identity. That would be very wrong. Well, if we want to achieve peace, and we are a party that want to at this stage, it's time to reconcile.
Yeah.
It's time to achieve unity. We can achieve so much as a nation, the 32 counties, but we can achieve an awful lot more together. And I think that our Protestant Ulster Scots fellow Irishmen can be part of that.
Okay.
And I think that they will benefit as well as ourselves from this new, so something very exciting, something that comes from the old, from the Gaelic Irish tradition, but it's something that will be very new and very exciting.
I
and
think
will create a great future for our country.
I think that's a theme I'm getting from you throughout everything we've discussed is a respect for tradition. I think that's putting it lightly.
But a radical approach.
Also a future-facing kind of.
I am the radical alternative, as I say, in this constituency. Yeah. We are the radical alternative.
You sound excited, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I have met people from the other tradition in Northern Ireland who have. I have met people who were involved in unionist politics, and they said I have a diametrically opposed position to them, totally because I'm a nationalist. But they could see that they weren't going to be tricked. The sincerity that an Irish nationalist, they've met an Irish nationalist who actually is a nationalist and sincere and doesn't want to pull one over him.
Yeah.
And then it's always the lack of trust. And look what the British done to them in terms of Boris Johnson throwing them under the bus and Brexit. And at a time when the Tory party depended on 10 DUP MPs to keep the last minority British government in power. So when they were thrown under the bus by the people they thought were their friends, who can they trust? They can trust Irish nationalists, I can assure you that.
And the national parties.
And the national party,
I mean, that it does sound like you don't want it. You don't get excited at the fact that they were betrayed by their British side, but I mean, it is in a sense an opportunity to
it's
offer.
an opportunity to I want that our flag. That's why I love this flag: the green, the white, and the orange. Reconcile. We need to reconcile both traditions.
Yeah.
But But here's the crucial difference, Garage. Reconciliation of both traditions is not in the Fianna Fáil Ireland for all type concept. Without diluting, I don't want this my wadi concept that we're diluting Irish nationalism. Irish nationalism can be undiluted, cannot be diluted. The national idea and our expressed by the National Party and our nationalist traditions must be upheld. Our flag, our anthem, our traditions must be upheld. But there's a mechanism and a means within human imagination to find a way of reconciling that with people with a very different tradition who came in here as colonizers 4 centuries ago, that we can live together as neighbours and as fellow citizens. Surely we can do that. It's not outside the human competence or human imagination to come up with a framework that we can all live with.
An agreeable
framework without diluting what we stand for, which is undiluted Irish Gaelic nationalism that spans the whole way back to Brian Boru and before.
Sounds good to me. Yeah. Now the last thing I want to ask is just your constituency is Longford-Westmeath, and you've had a fairly respectable campaign from a distance, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
You seem to be busy. How's it going for you? How are you finding it?
And getting tremendous response to the doors.
Yeah.
I brought my mother to mass locally in Ballinallee village today, and there was the priest invited after Mass people up for the blessing of the throats, St. Blaise's feast day, and people while they were going up were shaking hands with me, wishing me luck, and telling me they were going to vote for me. And this is in the village where my principal opponent, Micheál Carrigy, the Fine Gael candidate, is located. He lives in Ballinamee village. And so I'm very positive and very buoyed up that we'll win this seat, and this will be a win. It's not a win for James Reynolds as much as it's a win for Irish nationalism. And not even a win even for the for the National Party. It's a win for the Irish nationalism, and we can take our country back, and we can take things. And we want after the election, please God, to take the National Party to the next level. And I want to be part of a national parliamentary party. And I'm looking forward to February the 20th taking up my seat in Dáil Éireann.
I was going to say the revolution begins in Longford, but I've heard your thoughts on the French Revolution, so we won't go there. Right?
No, I'm very anti the French Revolution.
I'll link to that video. I was actually listening to it on the web. I have taken far more of your time than I deserve, so hopefully you'll forgive me.
I'm delighted because Sundays are, as you'd appreciate, Garage, it's a family day. People don't appreciate being canvassed on a Sunday. We kind of... Some canvassing is going off on my behalf at this moment by canvassers, but they quit early on a Sunday because people don't appreciate that. Well, and it's counterproductive.
Whatever day of the week we have, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. So, James Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Garage. Okay, thank you.
Like, share, subscribe, comment. Thanks for watching, guys. See ya.